I'd like to now invite our executive director, who has been so instrumental in bringing the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents to the path of its current success, the star, Thanos Dimadis.
Are you going to have it, please?
Yes, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here with us today. I want to thank, first of all, our board members and, of course, our chairwoman, Nancy Prager-Campbell, for all the leadership she provides. And she has been a great advocate of keeping our important work that we are doing every day. And despite the difficulties, despite the ups and downs, and despite sometimes the rejection, sometimes the positive outcomes, I think it is important what we do and that we keep fighting for what it is our cause. Nancy Prager-Campbell already thanked, of course, our supporters, George Sfigos, our good friend Ray Kerins, Richard Gingras, Zere Van Dijk, and so many other partners and supporters who are watching us online. I want to thank you, everyone, and also the Silverstein Properties for hosting us here today at the 7 World Trade Center in New York. The concept, I would say, of press freedom today is, and it's important, cannot be summarized, of course, in a few words. There is a discussion about the necessity of respecting the role of journalists in reporting objectively the developments around the world and providing the historical record of truth. During World Press Freedom Day every year, we hear messages, speeches, presentations that are made addressing the significance of the role of journalists in general and how successful democratic societies depend on the independence and the freedom of journalists. I, however, believe that there is one more important and urgent matter that we need as a society to address, and it is required to address it immediately in terms of the freedom of the press. The issue is the uncontrolled dissemination of misinformation and false news that feeds our society with, as we all know, polarization, division, confusion on a daily basis. At the same time, people have also changed the way they are reading the news, seeking out information that is given in a manner that is almost telegraphical, as we all know, without actually reading most of the times, but by waiting to receive the news in just a few words through a video of a few seconds. This, to my personal opinion, has caused people as consumers of news to become impatient with critical thinking about what they read, unable to stop the influx of misinformation into our lives, and unable to distinguish whether something is true or not. Although we make calls every year seeking respect for press freedom, I'm afraid that these calls have little effect. And this is where we have failed as journalists. I'm concerned that journalists primarily interact with each other rather than with our society. In my opinion, journalists are trapped in a microcosm where they seek, as we all see, recognition, freedom, and respect through a dialogue that occurs exclusively between themselves, between ourselves, but not with the society. Sadly, we approach society and interpret what society expects of us as journalists in terms of an era when people purchased their newspapers from newsstands, and when news were about what was happening in the outside world was exclusively provided by journalists, which is not the case anymore. In my view, journalists and journalism unfortunately tend to go out of fashion, and the question is how to make journalism fashionable again. We can achieve this by two means, to my personal opinion. First, we must invest in supporting the journalism and the journalists that serve the local communities. And the work being done by, for example, the Knight Foundation and also the Google News is vital to this end. At the same time, we must also reinvent journalism on the one hand by fostering new generations of journalists who do not view journalism as a typical job, but as a creative endeavor. Journalism, to my opinion, is more of an art than a profession, and journalists must think of themselves as artists who produce art. In order to succeed, these artists must know how to market their work. Therefore, journalists need to be trained in how to transform the art of journalism into a source of income for their work by capitalizing the opportunities technology is offering. For instance, how ready is journalism to embrace artificial intelligence? What level of readiness do the present and future generations of journalists possess to confront the proliferation of new forms of fake news, such as deepfakes? As journalists, how do we make journalism, our profession, a necessity for consumers again, and how we make journalism a product that meets consumer needs rather than our needs as journalists? Freedom of press does not only mean protecting journalists from danger, censorship, and vindictive treatment by authoritarian regimes. The biggest threat, to my view, is that the press freedom today is facing comes from journalists themselves, who are unable to convince the world that their role and work evolve at the same rate as our society evolves. With these thoughts, I would like to welcome back Susan Modaris Tehrani, and thank you for your attention.